o'clock. Sarah Walker looking after things for Anne Diamond all week. Now, it's one of those careers that we've all kind of dreamt about doing every now and again, but is the world of private detectives as glamorous and exciting as we all expect? They've had quite a lot of bad press recently in the light of the News of the World phone hacking allegations. And joining me this morning is Mike Rees, an independent investigator from Berkshire. Good morning to you. Thank you for coming in.
Morning, Sarah. Thank you.
I'm fascinated to learn how someone becomes a private investigator, because you didn't sort of decide when you were at school, I'm going to become a private investigator and work out the best route to that. You started off in banking.
I did. I mean, people always ask me whether I'm an ex-policeman or ex-military, because obviously there's a lot of private investigators who've got that sort of background. I came to it slightly differently. I worked for 30 years in banking. And unfortunately, when the credit crunch came, they decided they didn't want me anymore, so I was made redundant. And try to think, as they tell you when you're made redundant, is what is it you enjoy doing, and can you make a career of that? During my time in financial services, I'd managed a claims department with an insurance company, got involved with fraud things, and private investigators worked for us at that time. And then later on I got involved with sort of staff fraud and investigation, and that was something I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed it when you sort of cracked a case, as it were. Yeah. So I thought, I wonder if I can do that. So I thought I'd give it a go, and here I am today.
But the thing is, that a career change, you know, it's not the same as me deciding I want to become a police officer or a teacher and then knowing exactly how I would go about doing that. So you decide that you want to become a private investigator. What's the next step? What do you do?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I had some of the skills, because obviously, as I'd mentioned, some of the work I'd done before, I'd been involved in sort of fraud investigation and so on. So I sort of looked on the internet, and I looked at various private investigation firms that were around, spoke to a few of those, so if they had any vacancies going and so on. None of them did, unfortunately.
And did they view you as quite well qualified, having come? I mean, you had some experience of tackling fraud.
I had some experience, and also I had a sort of a general awareness of business and working in the corporate environment, which is something that not a lot of investigators have got. Right. They come from sort of police and investigative backgrounds. Yeah. I couldn't get anything sort of working for a firm. So in the end, after speaking to Answers Investigation, I'm with now, I decided to sort of join with them on a sort of a franchise basis. And I now run the, sort of own and run the Berkshire office.
And did you go straight into it, so to speak? Were you all presented with a case on day one?
No. There was a training, obviously. And that's the good thing about this franchise partnership, is that I can get the backup if I need it. And I felt probably on my own I wouldn't have been able to go ahead and do it. So, you know, there's training in sort of surveillance and...
So how do they train you to do surveillance well, then? Because I've got this image of, you know, you meeting up with your tutor at 6 o'clock in the morning, getting into a car, sitting there with donuts and black coffee and staking someone out. But that's probably not the reality of it, is it?
It's not far from that, actually.
Really? Tell me what the training involves.
Well, the training was going out and doing surveillance. So initially... I went out with one of the guys, and we followed somebody else who worked for the company. Right. So we were just...
So it's fake scenario.
Fake scenarios. Yeah. And then I went out and worked on a couple of real cases with them. Yeah. And, you know, they then handed more and more responsibility to me doing that, until I ended up doing it on my own.
But when they're sort of critiquing your surveillance skills, then, what would they pick you up on?
Well, one of the things I got picked up on my first job working with them was trying to go down an up escalator.
What?
Because the person I was following had gone down and then turned and sort of started to come back. And in the moment of panic, I just tried to go down the wrong escalator.
Oh, no.
Clearly, if that was a real job, I would have blown it there.
Yeah, because you would have drawn attention to yourself.
That's right. But, I mean, what you need to do is to try to keep out of the eye line of the person that you're following. Yeah. Obviously, you try and dress so that you blend in. So you're not looking obvious, but keep you out of the eye line, because even if you're dressed, you know, as I tend to dress fairly sort of blandly, so I sort of blend into the background, somebody might look and say, oh, that chap's got the same coat as I've got, and they've then noticed you. Yeah. They may not have seen your face, but then if half an hour later they see the same chap wearing the same coat again, then that might make them think something's a bit strange.
That's very difficult. Do you feel under pressure then when you're watching someone? Because there are some things you just have no control over.
Well,
like
no,
that.
There's lots of things that you don't have control over, but... When you first start, I was paranoid all the time. I knew, you know, oh, this chap knows I'm following him. He must know. I've been following him for ages. But in reality, of course, they don't.
Well, we'll come on to talk about some of your more memorable cases and really what you do on a day-to-day basis as well. I find it really interesting. And Mike Rees, private detective from Finch Hampstead, is my guest for this hour. So talk to me about what you're involved in on a day-to-day basis then. What kind of cases come to a private detective based here in Berkshire?
Well, one of the things I love about this job is the fact that it's so varied and, no 2 days are alike, really. I guess probably the sort of the three areas that we work in most is tracing. Where we'd be tracing, it could be debtors, it might be witnesses for solicitors, heirs to wills, beneficiaries to wills and so on, or even just sort of family members that have got lost or friends that have got lost. So we do a fair bit of that. A lot of that is sort of internet-based work. The surveillance we've mentioned, and the surveillance could be... often is sort of infidelity cases where husbands and wives believe that there's something going on that they want to know about.
Does that take up a large proportion of the work?
Not a huge proportion, no. Because again, on the surveillance, we do sort of moonlighting employees, for instance, working for companies who they think their employees are working somewhere else as well. I had one case where a chap was a forklift driver and they felt he was working the night shift somewhere else. And they were concerned, obviously, because if he's working all that time, he's going to be tired and in control of a big machinery like a forklift. That could be dangerous. So we needed to follow him and see where he went.
And was he?
He was, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess these are unpredictable hours for you as well. It's not your regular 9 to 5, is it?
It's not, no. But that makes it just as much fun, I mean, I did 30 years of 9 to 5.
Yeah, I guess so.
So it's nice to do something different.
So it's a refreshing change,
yes, and insurance claims as well on surveillance we'll do. And probably the third area of the three is process serving.
Right.
Where we're serving sort of court papers, whether it be sort of statutory demands for payment of debts or divorce proceedings or various other court orders. And basically that's just turning up in an address, identifying the individual and handing over the papers.
I know it's probably like saying how long is a piece of string, but on average, how long does it take from start to finish with a case?
It is a bit like a fishing. I mean, some cases you can, maybe the client will say to me, can you spend 3 or 4 hours on the internet seeing what you can find out about this? If it's a theft case, maybe theft from work, you could be at it for weeks. Not obviously all the time, but, on and off for weeks. So there isn't really an average time, I'm afraid.
Tell me about some of your most memorable cases and why.
Well, one of the memorable ones recently was a case for a client who owned a building in London. And part of the building was let out to a company that did massage. And there'd been some complaints from other tenants in the building that more than just massage was going on. So I was asked to look into it and see what I could establish. So obviously the thing to do was to go and get a massage.
To actually have to have one yourself.
So I had to go and have one myself. And it's difficult to feel that you're in control, of the situation when you're lying naked on a table.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And basically they wanted to know whether I was offered any additional services.
And were you?
And I was. And as they say, I made my excuses and left.
How do you feel, though, when you know that you have to do that, when you have to take up a case like that and do something that totally takes you out of your comfort zone in a way that must have done? How does it feel starting that job?
Apprehensive. But, I think it's good. Taking yourself out of your comfort zone is a good thing. It's a challenge. It opens up more doors, really. So I enjoyed it.
The massage or the actual...
the case, and I felt really relaxed afterwards.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. What else have you come up against over the years?
I had an interesting case with a lady, believe it or not, contacted me from Texas.
Right.
And she had met up with a gentleman on the internet and was apparently in love with him. And, of course, he was now asking her for money. And you can, your listeners will all know where this is going.
Yeah.
And the reason she contacted me was he apparently said he lived and worked in Bracknell, in the space industry in Bracknell, because, of course, we all know there's a huge space industry in Bracknell.
Yeah.
So she wanted me to just check him out and confirm that he was bona fide. I immediately thought he wasn't going to be, but she didn't want me to find he wasn't. She wanted me to find that he was okay.
Yeah.
So I sort of did some digging around, established that it was actually a scam and an attempted fraud. It took me a while to convince her because she was so convinced that she was in love with this chap. Eventually, I did. and therefore saved her the money. He was asking her to send her £10,000.
Wow.
To buy some special metals for his space industry job. And she was very grateful. And I later found out, I didn't realise at the time, but I think she was 70-something and she'd recently been divorced, obviously, very lonely. And of course taken advantage of on the internet.
It must be very difficult though as well, because you find out this information for people, you have a relationship with your clients, and sometimes when you find out things that you know they don't want to hear, I mean infidelity cases as well, I guess.
That's right.
It must be very difficult to break that news to someone, isn't it?
It is, and it's very sad, because somebody's lives are being turned upside down by what you found out.
Yeah.
But on the plus side, there's also nice times as well. I traced a lady's father. She'd never seen him. He'd left the mother when she was, I think, 6 months old. The mother wouldn't talk about it, so she had hardly any information. All I had was a name. Luckily, it was an unusual name. If it had been John Smith, I think we'd have been nowhere. But I was able to track this gentleman down in South Africa.
Wow.
And I know that subsequently they've been in touch, and he comes over to the UK occasionally, and he's met her. And that was fantastic.
Well, we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, and also some of the cases that you would refuse to do on principle, and a little bit about the news of the world, phone hacking allegation. Mike Rees is my guest for this hour, private detective from Finch Hampstead. You're a Spooks fan. You watched Spooks last night.
I was one of the 4.6 million, yes.
But your wife is a Downton Abbey fan, so did you do what everyone seems to have done and watched one and recorded the other?
That's absolutely what we did, yes.
Are you a Spooks fan because of the job that you do you think?
No, I don't think so. It's just something I enjoy anyway. I enjoy all those sorts of... I guess it's partly to do with what I do, but I enjoyed it before.
But when you see shows on television that involve private detectives and that sort of thing, do you sit there picking out inaccuracies going, that would never happen?
Yes, there's most of what happens wouldn't really happen, actually. And unfortunately, TV detectives are very keen to break the law, and they'll break into people's houses and all sorts of things, which, of course, doesn't really happen. I'm sure there may be some people out there who do that, but the majority of private investigators, it's a business. They earn their living, they feed their family by doing it, so they don't want to break the law, they just want to be above board.
In a moment, I want to ask you if you've ever said no to a job or what you would draw the line at. First, though, I'm interested to know the story that you teased us with tantalisingly before the Travel You Trust, which was one of your most memorable cases of a woman finally managing to track down her father. So just explain the story behind this again.
Yes, this was a lady who contacted me, or in fact, her husband contacted me, because she'd never met her father, and it was something she'd been looking to do for a long time. She was mid-30s, I think, and the father had left the family home when she was only 6 months old. Now, she couldn't get anything from her mother. Her mother was obviously very bitter about the whole thing and wouldn't give her any information. So all she knew was the name. As I said earlier, it was an unusual name, which gave us a little bit of room to work. And by using sort of online resources, things, birth deaths, marriage records and so on, I was able to get some information, and then just general internet searches. He used to be a business consultant, and therefore had some information on the internet about him, and I was able to track him down. He'd actually moved to South Africa.
Okay.
But I was able to contact him, explain who I was and what I was looking to do. He was delighted that his daughter had been in touch, checked with his new wife that it was okay to get in touch first, and then agreed to do that. So I put them in touch, and then subsequently learned that he does come over to the UK, still doing the occasional sort of talk, consultancy and so on, and he'd arranged to meet her.
And how did she respond when you sort of called her up and said, I think I found him? What was her reaction?
She was in tears. As you can imagine, this is something she'd thought about for ages and ages, and actually it was going to come true, and she's going to meet him.
Tell me about some of the cases that you've said, I'm not interested in doing that, I don't feel comfortable with doing that. What sort of cases are we talking about?
Well, as you say, anything that I don't feel comfortable with. I mean, when we take a case, I'll obviously ask lots of questions. What do they want the information for? What are they going to do with it? And so on. I had a case the other day where a gentleman rang me to say that his wife and his young child had gone missing, and could I help him find them?
Right.
So I said, well, what have the police said about this? And he gave me a fairly strange, garbled response about what the police had said, and I immediately put me on my guard. So I carried asking more questions, and it turned out eventually that his wife had left him, and she was now living in a woman's refuge.
Right.
And he wanted me to try and find her. Well, clearly, there's no way I want to be involved with that at all.
It must be very difficult, though, because it's not always easy to ascertain that information,
No, it isn't.
is it? And you could have taken up that case in good faith.
Yes.
And
yes.
you know, it would have resulted in a very difficult situation.
Yeah, there is a bit of, nothing I can call it other than gut feeling. When you talk to somebody and the answers they give you, if you feel they're not being honest with you, then you have to question what it is they want the information for, or what they want to try and find the person for. Obviously, anything to do with children, we're very, very careful. Somebody rang me the other day wanting to find a child. It may well have been perfectly legitimate, but I tend to sort of shy away just because it's, you don't want to make mistakes in those sorts of cases.
Yeah. Just finally, private investigators have come in for a lot of stick since the News of the World phone hacking allegations.
Yes,
you were saying to me a few moments ago that you still get requests for phone hacking in light of this.
Yes, we do. People will ring me and ask whether I can get access to somebody's phone records, and, voicemail records and so on. I've even had those calls while the news has been playing with the News of the World story, being broadcast. So people do ask for it. I mean, clearly, we don't get involved in that. There's something I have no interest at all in doing.
Do you think that private investigators get a bad press as a result of what's gone on very publicly, though?
Well, clearly, we've had a very bad press as a result of the News of the World story. And, in the past, I think there have been investigators who probably have done things which are sort of underhand, not helped, of course, by the TV investigators that you see who quite clearly happily break the law, always for the good reason. But, so, yes, I guess we do get a bad press. But the vast majority of investigators, are honest, law-abiding people. As in all walks of life, there are some bad apples, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in and talking about it all, because it's just absolutely fascinating. That's Mike Rees from Finch Hampstead on BBC Radio Berkshire.